Okay, today is the promise of the Redeemer and them getting the boot from paradise. So let's do this. Subtext: Promise of the Redeemer. After the fall of man, God made known to the angels his plan for the restoration of the human race. I saw the throne of God. I saw the most holy Trinity and the movement in the divine persons. I saw the 9 choirs of angels and God announcing to them the way by which he would restore the fallen race. I saw the inexpressible joy and jubilation of the angels at the announcement. I saw Adam's glittering rock of precious stones arise before the throne of God as if borne up by angels. It had steps cut in it. It increased in size. It became a throne, a tower, and extended on all sides until it embraced all things. I saw the 9 choirs of angels around it, and above the angels in heaven, I saw the image of the Virgin. It was not Mary in time, it was Mary in eternity, Mary in God. The Virgin entered the tower, which opened to receive her, and she appeared to become one with it. Then I saw issuing from the most holy Trinity an apparition which likewise went into the tower. Among the angels I noticed a kind of monstrance at which all were working. It was in shape like a tower, and on it were all kinds of mysterious carving. Near it on either side stood 2 figures, their joined hands embracing it. At every instant it became larger and more magnificent. I saw something from God passing through the angelic choirs and going into the monstrance. It was a shining holy thing, and it became more clearly defined the nearer it drew to the monstrance. It appeared to me to be the germ of the divine blessing for a pure offspring which had been given to Adam but withdrawn when he was on the point of hearkening to Eve and consenting to eat the forbidden fruit. It was the blessing that was again bestowed upon Abraham, withdrawn from Jacob, by Moses deposited into the Ark of the Covenant, and lastly received by Joachim, the father of Mary, in order that Mary might be as pure and stainless in her conception as was Eve was coming forth from the side of the sleeping Adam. The monstrance likewise went into the tower. I saw too a chalice prepared by the angels. It was of the same shape as that used at the Last Supper, and it also went into the tower. To the right of the tower I saw, as if on the edge of a golden cloud, grapevines and wheat intertwining like the fingers of clasped hands. From them sprang a branch, a whole genealogical tree, upon whose boughs were little figures of males and females reaching hands to one another. Its highest blossom was the crib with the child. Then I saw in pictures the mystery of redemption from the promise down to the fullness of time, and in side pictures I saw counteracting influences at work. At last, over the shining rock, I saw a large and magnificent church. It was the one holy Catholic Church, which bears living in itself the salvation for the whole world. The connection of these pictures, one with another, and their transition from one to another was wonderful. Even what was evil and opposed to the end in view, even what was rejected by the angels as unfit, was made subservient to the development of redemption. And so I saw the ancient temple rising from below. It was very large and like a church, but it had no tower. It was pushed to one side by the angels, and there it stood slanting. I saw a great mussel shell make its appearance, try to force its way into the old temple, but it too was hurried aside. I saw appear a broad, lopped-off tower, through whose numerous gateways figures like Abraham and children of Israel entered. It was significant of their bondage in Egypt. It was shoved aside, as well as another Egyptian tower in staircase form. The latter was symbolical of astrology and soothsaying. Then appeared an Egyptian temple. It was pushed aside like the others and remained standing crooked. At last, I saw a vision on earth, such as God had shown to Adam, that is, that a virgin would arise and restore to him the salvation he had forfeited. Adam knew not when it would take place, and I saw his deep sadness, because Eve bore him only sons, but at last she had a daughter. I saw Noah and his sacrifice at the time in which he received from God the blessing. Then I had visions of Abraham, of his blessing, and of the promise of his son Isaac. I saw the blessing descending from firstborn to firstborn, and always transmitted with a sacramental action. I saw Moses on the night of Israel's departure from Egypt, getting possession of the mystery, the holy thing of which none other knew save Aaron. I saw it afterward in the Ark of the Covenant. Only the high priests and certain saints, by a revelation from God, had any knowledge of it. I saw the transmitting of this mystery through the mystery of Jesus Christ, the ancestry of Jesus Christ, down to Joachim and Anne, the purest and holiest couple that ever lived, from whom was born Mary, the spotless virgin. And then I saw Mary becoming the living ark of God's covenant. Subtext: Adam and Eve driven from paradise. After some time I saw Adam and Eve wandering about in great distress. They were no longer beaming with light, and they went about, one here, the other there, as if seeking something they had lost. They were ashamed of each other. Every step they took led them downward, as if the ground gave way beneath their feet. They carried gloom wherever they went. The plants lost their bright colors, turned gray. The animals fled before them. They sought large leaves, wove them into a cincture for their loins. They had always wandered about, separate. After they had thus fled for a considerable time, the region of refulgent light, whence they had come, began to look like the summit of a distant mountain. Among the bushes of a gloomy-looking plain they hid themselves but apart. Then a voice from above called them, but they would not obey the call. They were frightened. They fled still further, hid still deeper among the bushes. It made me sad to see that. But the voice became more imperative, and in spite of their desire to flee and hide, they were compelled to come forth. The majestic figure shining with light again appeared. Adam and Eve, with bowed heads, stepped from their hiding places, but they dared not look upon their Lord. They glanced at each other, and both acknowledged their guilt. And now God pointed out to them a plain still lower than the one on which they stood. On it were bushes and trees. On reaching it, they became humble, and for the first time rightly understood their miserable condition. I saw them praying when left there alone. They separated, fell on their knees, raised up their hands with tears and cries. I thought as I gazed upon them, how good it is to be alone in prayer. Adam and Eve were at this time clothed in a garment that reached from the shoulders to the knee, and which was girded at the waist by a strip of the inner bark of a tree. While our first parents were descending lower and lower from the place of their creation, paradise itself appeared like a cloud to be mounting higher and higher above them. Then a fiery ring, like the circle sometimes seen around the sun and moon, came down from heaven and settled around the height upon which was paradise. Adam and Eve had been only one day in paradise, and now see paradise far, far off like a strip of land directly under the point of sunrise. When the sun rises, it mounts up from the right of that strip of land which lies east of the Prophet Mountain, and just where the sun rises, it looks to me like an egg hanging over indescribably clear water which separates it from the earth. The Prophet Mountain is, as it were, a promontory rising up through that water. In that mountain one sees extraordinarily verdant regions broken here and there by deep abysses and ravines full of water. I have indeed seen people climbing up the Prophet Mountain, but they did not go far. I saw Adam and Eve reach the earth, their place of penance. Oh, what a touching sight, these two creatures expiating their fault upon the naked earth. Adam had been allowed to bring an olive branch with him from paradise, and now he planted it. Later on, the cross was made from its wood. Adam and Eve were unspeakably sad. When I saw them, they could scarcely get a glimpse of paradise, and they were constantly descending lower and lower. It seemed as if something resolved, and they came at last, through night and darkness, to the wretched, miserable place upon which they had to do penance. End of reading. Okay, so first note. This is concerning the line, the Virgin entered the tower which opened to receive her, and she appeared to become one with it. If you read Mystical City of God, when the New Jerusalem is mentioned, and then it relates to her being, and then she uses like the 12 gates, although they represent the 12 apostles. She also represents it to 12 virtues in which the Virgin Mary held. So it's like she's a manifestation. This is why the book is called the Mystical City of God, because she is the New Jerusalem. She is the city. It's like her human form is just manifested into a city form. And so that's what that reminded me of. It's like saying Christ is on the temple, the high temple mount. He is the temple on the high mount, and Mary is the city in which one must enter in order to get to the mount. Next note. Concerning the line, near on it either side stood two figures. They joined hands, embracing it. Now this is, if you've ever seen pictures of the figures, the Cherubim on the Ark of the Covenant, you have something similar there. I think there's two angels standing over it and their wings are connected. But yeah, it's just a short note. It's an interesting comparison. Next note, concerning the line, even what was evil and opposed to the end in view, even what was rejected by the angels as unfit, was made subservient to the development of redemption. Now, I pray out of a deliverance book where Chad Ripperger likes to use the line, so that the demons may be sent to the foot of the cross, to be assigned as Christ pleases them. So even when the demons, even though the demons are fallen, they often come as a way, they often torment people as a way for God to test those people so that those people can prove themselves. So often when you read about great saints, I think of Saint John Vianney, who was tormented by Satan's voice trying to lure him off the path. Great saints will attract the presence of devils, and God allows the devils to come and torment them so as to test the faith of the great saints, so as to strengthen them. I also think of Padre Pio, Saint Padre Pio. He was physically thrashed. They call this dolor. He was physically thrashed by demons, like as if he was getting thrashed by a chain. So it happens. And that's what this line reminds me of, that evil even gets put to use by God in order to temper the good. And in the case of the Passion of Christ, it was to put, Mary and Jesus on the high mountain of that redemption. Okay, so last note, I might go about this for a bit because I have a pretty strong interest in astronomy as well. So I did a lot of studies for stars and planets and whatnot. So when they were descending from paradise, it almost sounded like the land that paradise was on was rising. And it was rising so much that they were getting colder and colder and colder. And so they had to continue to go deeper down the mountain. So they started in that luminous naked form with all the animals praising them. And then they started to clothe themselves. And they gradually, it started with the big cincture leaves or whatever, or the leaves they made into a cincture. And then they had a garment that went from their shoulders to their knees, and it was tied in the waist by the hemp, by the inner bark, as she called it. So what happened is it could have been that the land was rising and almost being torn off the earth. Like God just tore a strip of land from the earth and sent it up into the sky. Now, obviously, it's different when it comes to astronomical terms, because the way we know things is not the way she would have seen them. When people see things in visions, they see them according to their symbolic reference, meaning it may not have actually took place like that, but in a similar way. And when I look at it, it's like that clouds were enveloping it. Well, when you look at like let's say you're near Mount Fuji, you'll see clouds around the top, the summit. And the reason why is because it's so high and it's snowy up there. It's cold. And it's actually the mountains can be high enough to block clouds from moving. That's why the west coast of Canada and the US have such tall trees. The big red oaks there, or whatever, the red pine. I don't remember what kind of trees there. The one that General Sherman is. When those, I think they're called redwoods. But anyways, they're tall like that because the mountains stop the precipitation from carrying on over to the Midwest, over the Rockies. So all the precipitation falls out there. Well, California is a ripe spot for growing wine or vines, grapes. And you have the extreme vegetation over on the West Coast. Anyways, it sounds as though the mountain that they were looking at got so high, she said a ring of fire went around it. It's possible that mountain was now breaching the atmosphere and causing the glow, right? And it was probably causing like a dusty glow. It was almost like it was torn off the earth. Now, I'm not saying this is what happened at all. I'm just adding a new idea onto the pile of ideas that have already been out there. And they actually made a note on the Prophet Mountain that they're going to talk about it in book 4. I don't have book 4. I have books 1 to 3. So I don't know if this book 4 was ever released. But what I can say is whatever she was talking about may have not been physically manifest. It's more important for us to read it spiritually than to read it physically. Yet, what I can do is provide that explanation that it was a strip of land torn off the earth and now is perhaps in space somewhere. Maybe it was put inside the sun. Maybe it was put inside one of the Jovian planets like Jupiter. And I also believe that Jupiter and Saturn aren't like dense. I also don't believe the sun is dense. I believe all planets are hollow in a sense. They have varying thicknesses of their crust. There's lava and stuff that flows in them, but they're not, their core is not just a big ball of lava. The core actually has caverns and whatnot in it, full of huge diamonds. And I think every planet is like this because the way space works, it's such a thin, ether is so thin. They call it a vacuum, but I think I'll just prefer calling it an ether. It's so thin that it causes everything to ball up like a sphere. It's not to say, and we learn when you watch Thunderbolt's project, they introduce a lot of new ideas. Again, not to be taken as gospel, but just to be considered, right? And the way they said gravity works, that it's a very weak force compared to electromagnetism, it suggests that what we see from the sun, for instance, is a photosphere, a ball of light. But it's not to say that the sun is a big solid mass of gas and thermonuclear energy popping off, exploding like a series of explosions. They call it that, but it's not necessarily that. In Thunderbolt's project, they suggest it's actually, the sun's actually like a conduit of electrons, that when electrons flow into our system, it flows into the star, flows out of the star through its polar regions. So the sun acts like a light bulb, and there may actually be an interior region of the sun. And they say of many things that sort of support their theory. For example, sunspots. When we look at sunspots, they're black. They're not going even hotter. They're not going even whiter. They're black. They're dark. They're moles, which suggests that there's like abysses there. Well, there may be abysses underneath the earth as well. Like, they call it the bosom of Abraham. Christ calls it the bosom of Abraham. When Lazarus was, and this was the parable, when the rich man was in hell and Lazarus was in the bosom of Abraham, and there was an abyss between them. It suggests that there's like, and this is not to say that it is not, it is this way when you go to heaven, like you're just going to a physical place. It's not. But that our creation, our being reflects what is eternally relevant. So meaning we have hells and caverns in the earth, and they're eternally relevant to what is in eternity, although eternity is technically a different place. So it's like we are in two places at once. We're both on the earth and we're in heaven, in sort of like a waiting thing. We're not in heaven physically, but we're in heaven in the soul. Our souls desire to be closer to God, and they exist concurrently because eternity exists outside of the realm of time. It's a very difficult thing to comprehend because we have spent all our whole times in this temporal realm, unable to see what's in the eternal realm, in the life. Now, there may be abysses beneath the surface of the earth. We don't know. The only thing, and I'll tell you this, they study earthquakes by sending radio waves through the earth, right? And the only reason they know, they believe there's a core of iron at the center is that radio waves don't go through that. It's being interrupted. So they found a cone. They sent signals to bases on the other side of the planet. And they found a cone structure they couldn't send to certain spots on the other planet, like a blind spot. And they feel that the core is what interrupts the radio waves, so they trace a core based on which bases receive the radio signals and which ones don't. Now, if we can send radio waves through the Earth, it may suggest that, well, what's in there? What interrupts in there? Are there living creatures in there? Because we know that troglodytes, which are creatures that never see the light of sun, live in deep caves. Well, what's to say that the Earth doesn't have even deeper caves? They're even hotter. And that can go up to a point where gravity reverses and goes towards the shell of the Earth. So we're like on an egg, and gravity reverses when you go deep enough, but not when you go all the way across the Earth. Which means there'd be like an internal world in there, but it'd be like fiery and warm and stuffy and whatever, like full of carbon dioxide and sulfur and whatnot. We don't know what's in there because we've never been there. The problem is if you try to bore deep into the Earth enough, you'll hit lava. So and you don't know, you can't go through it, because nothing can really go through lava unless you've got extremely good alloys. Even then, how are you going to stop the heat from transferring inside whatever vessel or probe you send down there? Plus the amount of, and this is another thing, the amount of sheer pressure formed out of that magma would be insane. Yeah, and we think of the ocean. If you guys remember the disaster last year that happened with the little vessel that went to visit the Titanic, which imploded on itself. Well, the reason it imploded on itself is that abyssal depths in the water, you have extreme pressure. And when I say extreme pressure, it squashed that thing like a bug. The implosion would have disintegrated anything inside. When it blew up, they wouldn't have even noticed they died. They would have just suddenly turned into souls. That's how fast it would have happened because of the sheer amount of water pressure. Now imagine magma pressure, which is rock that's buried deep underneath, that's just turned into fire. Just a pressury fire, dense, full of metals and carbon and whatnot. Right? And that's why we can't access the center of the Earth other than through radio waves. But there's a lot of mysteries concerning that yet. Now, as for paradise, where is it? Is it at the center of the Earth? Is it above the Earth? Is it in a Jovian planet? Is it in the center of the sun? We don't know, but it's fun to speculate. Anyways, that's the end of the video. Ave Maria.